Hey everybody, this is Mike Antozzi here. I'm the Director of Practice Growth Consulting here at MyAdvice. I'm here with my friend, professional colleague, confidant, fuzzy man, Randy Torben.
Hello, everybody. I'm Randy Torben. I'm the Senior Practice Analyst for Symplast EHR, and I have the pleasure of course, having this live conversation at the Aesthetic Show out here at the Wynn with Mike Antozzi. And today, we just want to talk a little bit about the best practices, the methodology, the workflow where marketing and an EHR can come together to optimize a practice. And doing this live, the nice thing is that we have our trusty iPad here so that we are receiving questions from attendees of the show. So if you see Mike or I look down at our iPad, we're not being rude. We're simply trying to read that question.
Awesome.
I think for the purposes of this conversation, which as all of you will see is incredibly casual, we really want to talk through, as I had said, the workflow and the process, where a lead's life cycle begins through potentially becoming a patient, and ultimately how we get that patient to cycle back through, become an additional patient, become an advanced patient, and take advantage of the full suite of services that are available at either a plastic surgery practice or a medical spa. Now, Mike, I'll be honest, when it comes to things like new client acquisition, coming from the EHR side, I will have to defer to you. So let me ask on behalf of probably every single person at the Aesthetic Show, is there a difference between what is a historical methodology of acquiring new patients versus what you and MyAdvice would suggest as a new best practice for acquiring patients?
Well, I think, Randy, what's important to understand, and I hear this all the time from practices that I talk to when I ask the question, well, how is the business side of your practice? Where are you getting new patients from? And I'm sure you can relate to this as well, too. Every practice is going to say, oh, we're word of mouth driven. We get a lot of our patients through word of mouth referrals. And let's be honest, you should be. If your practice is not primarily driven off of word of mouth, there's a level of problem at your practice that no level of marketing or EHR implementation can help to fix. That means you're not doing good work. So frankly, you should be word of mouth driven. With all that being said, though, the traditional word of mouth pipeline has really gone by the wayside. It's aged. And what I mean by that is even when patients are being told to go to a practice, what's the first thing that you would do? Are you just simply picking up the phone to give them a call to say, hey, I'm going to go? No, we Google that practice's name. We want to come across their website. We want to see what their reviews are, how good their social media is. So it's very, very important, number one, that a lot of your marketing strategy is built to affirm the great quality of care. Because if patients are not also then sold by the great presence or the great impression that they're finding about you online, that word of mouth referral means nothing. They're just going to go over to the next practice or to the other practice that they really feel like they can get that sense of confidence within. So when we work with a practice, it's really about optimizing that lead flow channel. It all starts with having a great website. And to be honest with you, there's a lot of folks that can build you a website, but not everyone knows how to do it in the right way that's going to drive leads. One of the first questions that I'll always ask when I'm giving a presentation, for example, is why do you have a website? Folks will say, well, it's so people can look me up. They can see what I do. They can download forums. Others will say, well, you're not legitimate unless you have a website. Those are all components to what a website does, but the driver of it is to make money. It's about converting leads. It's about making the phone ring. It's about having inquiries that are coming in. It's about filling up that revenue channel, that revenue pipeline to convert more of those patients, more of those leads into patients, which is where Symplast then really comes into play with helping to extend more of what we call that patient lifetime value, which I know that we're going to be talking about a little bit later.
Sure. So if I'm understanding this and coming at it from the EHR side and data management, one of the primary lead channels is going to be referrals. But if I'm hearing you, once a person has a referral, they're still going to other channels to do research. They're going to social media. They're going to your website. They are trying to find out additional information to solidify their decision. So how do you manage that? How do you play on that? How do you make sure that your clients know, yes, I have a great referral system, but these referrals then come into me from these additional channels from researching?
Well, it's all about really qualifying that data, right? You have to, we talk a lot about in the world of KPIs, and that actually starts on the marketing side. And I know that with Symplast and Randy, your whole world is about understanding the data.
Mm-hmm.
Because let's be honest, if your practice is not data driven, you're not operating with a higher level of business intelligence.
Well said.
You cannot operate or grow a practice based around speculation. It has to be, what does the data say to you? So when we work with a practice, it's all about measuring data, understanding things in terms of where your leads are coming from the website. Are you getting a more percentage of inbound phone calls, or is it through chats, or
Right.
is it through form fills from a website?
That's exactly what I was thinking.
And then it's also about, too, what are you doing to give that practice more exposure, which is really frankly, where a lot of the marketing pieces come into play. And what I will tell you, Randy, is that 90% of my practices that I work with do not know how to align a proper marketing strategy.
Well, you're going to have to give us more details about
Well,
that.
what I mean-
Alignment and proper marketing strategy, it seems, is that a heavy lift?
It's not necessarily a heavy lift, but it has to be done in the right way. Let me give you an example. So I recently just started peptide therapy.
Okay.
And I was doing my intake with my doctor, and she was basically, just to give you guys my background, I'm going to be 40 next year. I have 2 kids. Starting to age a little bit more. I'm feeling a little bit more tired. I want to feel more invigorated again. So my doctor was taking my intake, and she was asking me, all right, well, what's your lifestyle like? And I said, well, I eat really well at home. I don't drink. I mean, we have a glass of wine at night, but I'm not a heavy drinker. I don't smoke. I exercise a lot. And my doctor said to me, she said, well, you're going to get a really good result from these peptides
Mm-hmm.
because you already come built with the right foundation, right? Now,
Okay.
let's flip it on its coin. Maybe I am, 300 pounds overweight, and I smoke and I drink, and I'm here in Vegas partying my face off. And I came to my doctor to say, hey, make me feel better with these peptides. Or maybe there's that patient that a practice might be serving to say, well, make me look better with Botox, but I'm not going to change my unhealthy lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Right. So you are naturally a good candidate because your lifestyle complements
It
what the program calls for.
Exactly right. Because the foundation is there, the results that you're going to get are going to be well optimized. And a digital strategy works no differently.
Mm-hmm.
In my world, the phrase search engine optimization, it's a very common thing that practices want to get sold on.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I just want to be very clear, I'm not poo-pooing SEO. It can be a really, really effective strategy.
Sure.
But it's not the first thing that you do.
Okay. Then what is?
So the very first thing is, once a practice does have a website, is they need to align what we call their local listings.
Okay.
And making sure that their business data and how your business information is being seen among what we call local directories is going to be consistent and accurate. Now, Randy, you probably have done this before. You go to Google,
Mm-hmm.
You want to find a resource online. Maybe
Okay.
it's a restaurant, or maybe it's a med spa practice or a dry cleaners.
Sure.
How do you typically search for that?
Well, I might look for something that's close to me, right?
Close to you.
I want to look for something that I can go to. I can be there. It's not going to be a schlep. It's not going to be a hike. It is in my geographical area. Sure.
So do you ever search using the phrase near me, for example?
I have, or I'll put in my zip code, or I'll put in my city, or I'll put in something to
Correct.
assist Google in directing into my geographical area. Absolutely.
So that's how search is utilized. Half of all Google searches are intentionally based to find local resources. People will do searches like med spa near me, breast augmentation near me, plastic surgeon near me, what have you. So what Google really looks to see is, first and foremost, it doesn't look at your website first. It doesn't look at your social media first. Those things are important, but they come later. But the very first thing that Google does want to see is the alignment of what we call the practice's location data. So if there's misalignment there, if a practice has moved a location, if they've rebranded themselves, if they've had a tracking phone number, what have you, all that incongruency really messes with how Google can trust that practice.
Okay.
And to promote that practice more. Now, this is just a bread and butter localized search. We're not going to Google to say, hey, Google, I'm getting breast augmentation done. Should I have my implant under the muscle or over the muscle? Or, hey, Google, what's the difference between Botox versus Dysport? Those are more content-based strategies.
Okay.
And that's a much more sophisticated, higher-level search.
Are many of your clients, or even before they become your clients, and maybe this is a loaded question, would you say the majority of the industry is doing that?
They focus on that tactic
Okay.
at first,
Okay.
but they don't have the right foundation. So those listings fortify the foundation. So again, it's just kind of that example that I utilized earlier where it's like, hey, make me feel better with peptides, or I'm going to look better through, getting some type of facial injectables, but the foundation isn't there. The patient's not going to get those optimized results.
And that makes sense. Now, let me ask, because I think you're a really good example and we can stick with it. So if we're looking for a practice, a provider, a service that is close to us, but that next step, and maybe I say this biased because of an EHR and the data that we're collecting for the patient, but if you're looking for peptides and you're looking for a specific outcome, once you find a practice, once you find a practitioner, are you then leveraging the information on their website to make a decision? And if so, are you looking for different pieces of information? So you're looking for the service that you're looking to receive, but are you also looking for, let's say, similar people that have received it? Are you looking for fellow
sure.
40-year-olds? Are you looking
Absolutely.
for people that share that lifestyle so that you know this practice has seen success and outcomes with people like
on that
you?
patient profile?
Right.
Yes, of course, absolutely, all the time. I mean, that's where things like testimonial videos on a website can become really, really important, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Giving the patient another, similar person that might have been in their position,
Yep.
and what was their experience like. That's where online reviews can become very, very important. Even photo gallery construction as well, too, Randy. I mean, I see this all the time. Like really, really good galleries on aesthetics practices will typically qualify, well, this was a 40-year-old patient with XYZ conditions. And then, so the more that you can feed content about your practice and really establish yourself being as that authority, the more it's just going to help with converting better quality leads into a practice. And I say that intentionally. It's not about volume. It's not just
Quality.
it's not about stuffing the sales funnel, but it's also about getting the right type of patient into your practice.
Sure.
Which is where then systems with what you do in really helping practices to understand their data better.
Sure.
Right? There's such a natural symbiosis, if you will, in terms of what we do to drive quality opportunities into a practice, and then how the practice can work with a system like Symplast to really maintain those opportunities to extend that lifetime value.
And so with that in mind, if I'm hearing you correctly, again, it's quality over quantity, because time is a factor. We only have so much capacity at our aesthetic business, whether it's a med spa or plastic surgery practice. So we want to make sure the leads are properly educated. They know what they're looking for. They see the outcome that they want. And that is what inevitably should make them reach out, not the patient who is starting to do their research but is not sure whether or not they're the right fit for that procedure yet.
I mean, you have to I think it's all of a balance, to be honest with you. Because,
Okay.
I mean, that patient that might be doing that search for a certain service or a procedure, I wouldn't necessarily say that you don't want to convert them. Maybe they might need a little bit more nurturing, right?
Okay.
But it's about getting that right initial inquiry into your practice,
Okay.
right?
So if I will backpedal a little bit and say, so you're looking to capture both of those patient profiles, those that have researched and are potentially ready to book, those who have started doing their research, see the practice as an advisor, maybe an industry leader, and then they are calling to ask questions, which should hopefully lead to them being more educated and then booking.
Of course. I mean, listen, it's no different in our space as well, too, right? I mean, how long have you known a doctor or a practice before they started to actually invest into a system like Symplast?
Absolutely.
Right? Sometimes it could be years until a client might be ready. But it's about making sure that when they are ready to pull the trigger, that they are remembering you, that they are seeing you as being the authority, which is why a great website becomes very, very important. Why you want to have great reviews online and to be generating reviews consistently. Good social media. You never know when a patient is going to be in that position where they're ready to pull the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
And as you and I probably know, even when we work with our practices, it can take a long time for somebody to make a decision, even on getting something as simple as Botox.
Sure.
But by the time we've made that decision, boy, we went at that yesterday already.
Yep. Absolutely. Now that leads to a very interesting question. When they're ready, they're ready. Now, one thing from an EHR perspective, and I'm looking for your insight on, are things like online booking tools, because
Sure.
there are clients that don't believe in it. They want that personal touch. And there are other clients that kind of see the forest through the trees and say, if somebody's laying in bed at 11 o'clock at night researching and I'm their Huckleberry, let's let them book the appointment. From a marketing perspective, do you have an opinion or any insight on online booking, to do, to not to do, or how to optimize?
Well, first of all, with online booking, what I will tell you is that you want to make sure that you're being positioned for both, right?
Okay.
There's going to be patients that, yes, they want you to be their huckleberry. They're ready to get going. How can I get an appointment?
Okay.
And there's also going to be people that maybe I'm still kind of figuring this out right now. I'm not necessarily might not necessarily be ready for that booking right now, but how can I at least get in touch with the practice?
Sure.
So you want to be well positioned to do both.
Okay.
Now with online booking though, what is critical is calls to actions. You want
What
to
do you
make
mean?
Well, for example, on a website, for example,
Mhm.
how annoyed do you ever get when you go to a website and you can't find a phone number?
Pretty annoyed, right? It almost makes
Or
me want to go to a different site.
it makes you want to go to a different site, right? Because that's the sense of urgency with how people engage with practices online,
Sure.
right? It's a reptilian mindset. We just want things to be very, very easy, right? It's all about making it easier for your patient base. And so what I will always tell my practice is you want to make sure that that booking link is never leaves the eye line of a visitor. When they're
Smart.
on a website, doesn't matter where we scroll, that call to action to book now should always be on the eye line. It should never disappear. Same goes with the phone number, for example. Uh, this is why we talk about websites. Their goal is to make you money, and money is made by creating leads easier, reducing the friction points. So making sure that a phone number always stays available on the
Mhm.
eye line. When a site consolidates its down to a mobile, down onto a smartphone, for example,
Okay.
and you know this as well too. The internet is mobile in today's age.
Sure.
We are much more online through our smartphones than even a desktop computer. So making sure that that booking link is consolidates itself down onto a smartphone device or it's onto an iPad, for example, or on a desktop computer. Those calls to actions always need to be front and center because it's about reducing the friction points.
Mike, you're making the point about optimization and utilizing phones, and I can say that this is no longer the '90s rom-coms of people laying in bed with their computers. Now we're all going to bed and we're all on our phones. So as we're doing our research and as we are looking for aesthetic practitioners, plastics, or med spas, what percentage of research would you say the current patient is doing in front of their computer versus on their phone?
So it's a really great question. What I will tell you generally, Randy, on average, 75% of a website's traffic in today's age happens on a smartphone versus
Wow.
a desktop computer.
Say that again.
So
75%.
75% on average, a website's traffic is more on a smartphone than from a desktop computer. Now, that wasn't always the case. I mean, 13 years ago when I was consulting in this space, I was actually around during a time where there were no mobile phones. So there were no optimized websites for a smartphone. That just goes to show you how quickly things evolve in our
Mm-hmm.
industry. Just even this year, we've seen the onslaught of AI and how that has changed everything in
Sure.
terms of information accessibility. If you think about how platforms like Uber or Lyft or Amazon have just completely transcended themselves and
Sure.
become much more, um, the digital space moves at a rapid pace. And so, which is also another reason why when you want a strategy to work well,
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to look at it as being stagnant.
It's got to be ongoing.
Your marketing strategy is always fluid, right?
Mm-hmm.
It has to be growing, it has to be evolving, it has to be changing, which is why where I will say a lot of failure points that I see practices have within their strategies is that there's not a collaborative relationship with the marketing company that they work with. I hear this a lot when practices might come to work with us and they'll say, well, I can never get in touch with my website people, or if I make a call, it takes them a week to get back to me, or I have all these questions and no answers. Ultimately, a lot of the success is about how a practice is also being guided with the relationship.
Okay.
So it's not just about having a website. It's not just about having good reviews, but it's about how a practice is also being coached on a continual basis to use and to move that strategy forward. No different how they might work with you with understanding a lot of their data and
Mm-hmm.
how they can be better positioned with the data that they're collecting to expose new opportunities for growth within their practice.
Sure. So to me, that means that transitioning from that prospect, that potential patient that is laying in bed doing research, sitting at their desk doing research, all of this information that is being collected, where they came from, the services that they're interested in, as this is now transposed into the EHR, clearly we don't want to lose any of this data. So are there some specific data points, Mike, that you would say from a MyAdvice perspective, you say as a best practice need to flow, whether integrated or not, but need to flow from the marketing piece into the EHR so that we can truly track from prospect to patient? What are those key data points you would say?
Well, there's a few things that we look for. It depends on really the data that we're sourcing. Is it about just the trafficking to the website, or is it about how it's really typically converting into leads?
Well, I would say converting, but I would say that the traffic is super important too, because we need to see what brought them to the website to convert.
Right. So when we're looking at some things, we want to first of all understand, what are how exposed is this website? What are people actively searching for? So understanding a lot of their keyword analysis, right? Digging into the trafficking in terms of, is a practice just being found for these rudimentary near me searches, for example, or is it going to be more specific, more advanced? Some of those questions that patients might be going online to Google to ask.
Mm-hmm.
So we study all of that. And to be honest, every practice is also going to be different based around their practice maturity. For
That's
a
a
very
good point.
smaller and embryonic practice, they might just be looking for some of that bread and butter near me searches that we study. Whereas a practice that might be more established and they're looking to get much more specific with the type of patient that they're trying to convert, that's where more of that long tail content traffic that we might be trafficking really comes into play. But understanding other data points too, in terms of your website's bounce rate, for example. What percentage of people come onto the website and they leave right away. If you have a very high bounce rate, that means that you're not converting that well.
Okay.
Which gives less efficacy to the data than that an EHR might utilize then to be able to understand how they can better refine and use that data for patient retention, for example. Understanding the pages of your website, what pages people are going to the most. And we might use some of that data to give recommendations to how to beef up content. Maybe, hey, if this one page on breast augmentation is, really getting most of your traffic, let's get a YouTube video of you talking about that service or that topic, why patients might want to come to you for that service, why you're the best at it. Because we know that when content pieces like that are then integrated, the data is more specific, that it can help to position you to convert a better quality lead.
That's a good point. Now, I would say transitioning from lead and prospect to patient, that's some good information to then take into the EHR, but then that's also then information we would want to pull from the EHR to then have you leverage in terms of marketing. So you had given the example of breast augmentation. Well, okay, so the before and afters that we're creating are then things that we should want to post on our website because we know how popular that page is. If we're beefing up content, you can take a video, as you had suggested, talking about that. But I would say to leverage, again, before and afters, to leverage patient testimonial videos about the positive outcomes for breast augmentation.
Absolutely.
These are all things that can be captured in the day-to-day processes of your consult, of your pre-op, of your operation, of your post-op. So it seems like there's data that needs to be captured, to be leveraged from the from the marketing side, then into the practice. But it's just as important to then take that data from the practice and leverage it back into marketing.
Absolutely. It's a very much a cyclical relationship. And so the better tied that really your marketing can be to your integrated systems, it's only just helping to put a practice into a much more competitive position.
Okay, so that would probably be a good transition to go from prospect and data that we're collecting ahead of the appointment to the data that's being collected as we're transitioning into the patient. I think that should take us into our second topic of conversation, which is leveraging that patient flow in your EHR to then have more outcomes, more patients, more conversions from the upfront prospect perspective. Is that correct?
I would absolutely agree with that.